Out in Broomfield, where the foothills rise, there's a little place with open skies.
I'm Dr. Decibel, and this is The Refuge. Today, we're exploring the first core value of this community, welcome, and a phrase that has shaped the Refuge from the very beginning. There's always room at our table. To help tell that story, I'm joined by two people who embody welcome in a very different but deeply connected ways. Kathy Escobar is one of the founders of the Refuge. She helped shape the vision, posture, and practices of welcome that continue to guide this community today. And Steve Palmer serves on our peer support team. He's been part of the Refuge since 2022, walking alongside others and helping create space where people feel seen, heard, and valued. Together, they help us understand what welcome really looks like, how it's practiced, how it's tested, and why it still matters. Let's get into it.
A wooden door, a welcome sign. It's more than walls, it's hearts combined.
Thank you so much for being here, guys. It's always a pleasure.
It's so fun to talk about welcome.
Welcome, Dr. Decibel.
Kathy, let's talk about how, it seems like it would be super obvious, but how and why did welcome become a core, if not the core value?
Well, in our formation, the first thing that I think we processed a little bit in the first episode was just centered on the 12-step recovery model that we brought into the Refuge. Like a lot of us were in 12-step together. And the thing about every circle in 12-step meeting is that anybody's welcome. Anybody who is seeking healing, change, healing from addictions, finding sobriety, trying to do things differently is welcome at the table. And so that model just came into our community from the beginning. And that was that wherever you were, whatever you believed, whatever you were struggling with, whatever was working well for you, it didn't matter. There was a space at the table for everybody. We didn't actually name it welcome as a value until our 10-year birthday, when we did some work on cultivating our shared values instead of shared beliefs. But welcome was number one from the beginning. That was who we were about, is just there is room at this table for everybody.
How about some examples of welcome and what it looked like before it was officially a value?
Everyone got to play. So that's a huge part of welcome, is that in a lot of systems, only certain kinds of people get to play. And so that's people with margin or money or education or status or somehow spiritual, what's the right word for it? Like spiritual knowledge. A lot of times in a lot of communities, those things are elevated as like those people are more valued. And for us, it always was anybody could come. So you could be unhoused, you could be struggling with mental illness, you can be a single mom, barely making your payments, you can be in part of the LGBT community, whatever it was, you were welcome here. So the group of people that started with the Refuge were really a ragtag group of, we just always kind of called it the land of misfit toys. And that really does embody us. And it always has, because there's so many ways that we didn't fit in other places. And even me as like a white, educated, resourced woman, as a female leader in systems, I was not welcome at the table. So we created a place where anybody could lead and anybody could be part, and it didn't matter. When we were all together, our shared humanity was at the center. And so it just always looked very diverse, messy, a little confusing, because a lot of communities have more of a homogenous model. Like there's just more people. There's young families with children, or there's couples, or there's certain, we were everybody all thrown in to one because of radical welcome.
I know when you first arrive at the Refuge, one of the first faces you'll see is Steve's.
Yes.
Let's talk about welcome, in real time. Let's talk about room at the table moments.
In listening to Kathy, I wasn't around 20 years ago to see the beginning of all of this, but a lot of people forget the precept that how you treat the least of them is how you've treated me. Or I believe that's at least a parable that is shared in some faiths. And I think that that probably intuitively guided that sense of inclusivity that founded and is a bedrock of this community, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think of your story, honestly, Steve, is like what you experienced with Welcome. I mean, I'd love to hear from your perspective because you weren't here. You came into the story 3 or 4 years ago and walked in the door.
I personally am what I do believe is known as a cisgendered white male with some education who, though I was not necessarily brought up in a healthy or wealthy environment, I still had those kinds of bias in my favor. And yet I personally had completely melted down and failed at being a white male in our society. And yet when I came through the door, I was still welcomed as though I were human and valuable and cared for by complete strangers who quickly became my family, from my perspective. I recall my first 2 days in this building, I spent a lot of time on the telephone weeping to a friend who I thought could also benefit from this kind of community about how overwhelmed I was by the welcome I had received and continued to receive the first and throughout the first day I was here, and then again the second day as well.
Well, and I mean, honestly, like I remember when Steve came and I remember who the interns were. And I remember so many things about that season. And what was so amazing, and makes me kind of weepy, is that Steve came in, looking for a sandwich.
Yes.
And needed to just see what was here and eat something. And then Steve was like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do to help? And here, give me a broom. How I want to close. We're like, it's okay. You can just like hang out. You don't have to do anything. And yet that embodied really one of our other core things, which is at the Refuge, everyone gives and everyone receives. And I think that that's a piece of welcome somehow. So it's not like we're all like standing around going, here, we welcome you in. And then we're in this place and you're in that place. Like we're really just all in this together. And I think you embodied that so well. And we're just like, yep, here we go. So we all give and we all receive. And I think the fun part for me in watching your story is that it's like you walked in and you just never left.
I was drawn to a table where like 6 people had generally made court, hung together. It was like a little clique, and they pulled me to that table and they sat me there and they kept me there. And they continued to engage with me and push burritos toward me and just make me feel like I belonged at a time when I had convinced myself I belonged to nowhere. And so that was so striking and so overwhelmingly gratifying to my sense of self and humanity that I just had to catch the vibe and go with it in order to continue to be a part of what I had decided was quite a wonderful thing.
There's a shadow side of welcome. Has there ever been any times when there has been an emotional or relational cost to real welcome?
Every day. Yeah, I mean, on the whole, it is way more benefit than cost. 100%. I would say in all these years, I mean, now we are on 20, which is really funny to be able to say, like, we have had some hard situations over the years that have made us really sad because there was a space at the table. We wanted people to be here, but we do have guidelines on safety. And so sometimes people just aren't in a place where they can hang here. For now, or for that moment in time. And that is really like taps into something really deep in us. Like it's hard for us when those situations have happened where we do have safety guidelines of not using violent language and not using drugs and alcohol. And we have a lot of trauma survivors here. And so, you can't do certain things that tap into people's stories.
And trigger from
it's just not safe
from
enough.
Who knows where
Yeah.
and who knows how.
Yes.
It really can happen in an instant.
Yeah, and we were really, I'm not sure this is kind of on the books, and this is way before your time, but we went through a season where we used the line, the refuge, where everyone is safe, but no one is comfortable. And that was a chunk of years ago. It was before we were in this facility, so probably 2011-ish, 12. And that worked for a while because we were trying to hold divergent views in the same space. So it was more on that. But what we realized is that wasn't true. Everyone's not fully safe. What we try to shift to is like we can create as safe and brave of a space as possible. And so we kind of changed that. So when we moved to kind of safety, that's probably the hardest thing for us is when people just can't honor those guidelines and aren't able to be safe enough, at least then, to sit at the table and be able to be part. And it just taps into our deep hope for compassion and healing. Like we just don't want to leave anyone behind. But I can say this, on the whole, we haven't. We've had people that have had to take breaks for a season for different reasons and have come back. And then there's some people that get really mad at us and don't want to ever come back and write mean things about us in public and stuff like that. And that's okay because we know that we tried harder than I do believe most communities would try. I do believe that. Our welcome extends really far. I always say it's like hard to lose the refuge community. You have to break a lot of guidelines before you're not welcome at the table temporarily.
There has to be boundaries, and it is boundaries versus openness.
But I think there's always room, unless it is a very extreme circumstance, there's always room here for forgiveness as well. Mm-hmm. And I've seen people who have been asked to take a break for a series of times or a period of time, who then had to basically who even fought their own return here because their own attitudes kept them from completely understanding their responsibility in that early break. However, one of those persons I'm not going to name is here almost every day we're open. And that person was asked to take a break under a very extreme circumstance wherein there was threats and things involved. And that person is now, I would consider, a core part of this community as an attendant here at the cafe and at many special events on the off hours as well.
So just a fine, solid example of grace and accountability coexisting within the community.
It's so possible. And I think the piece for us is we are trying to be a corrective experience for people. For myself, it's been a corrective experience for me. And corrective experiences are just things that, like, you go in thinking it's going to be bad and it actually turns out to be good. And it heals something in us. And so I can say for me, like, I've had a lot of bad experiences as a female leader in evangelicalism, and this has been a corrective experience for me. We want to create that for other people. And I think a lot of times people are used to being on the outs automatically. They're set up for that. And then we're like, no, we're not going to leave you. Like, we're really here. But people have choice and agency. So just because we extend welcome doesn't mean we're going to pull everybody and say, you have to stay here. You know, there's some jokes. Sometimes people have called us a cult. Like, it's a cult because people are really into, like, love the refuge and will defend the refuge. And we're like, it's not a cult. You can leave anytime you want.
But who wants to?
You can do whatever you want. And no one is controlling you in any way, shape, or form. And I think that that is a piece sometimes. Welcome is extended and it's the right time and the right season for people. And then they need something else. And so part of actually a healthy system is that it goes, yes, we want you to find the other thing that you need. We just played a small part in the story by having an open table and having a place for you at that time in your life.
It's probably important that I clarify when I said that that person needed to have a little more coaching to understand their responsibility in the circumstance. It wasn't that they didn't want to come back. It's just that they didn't necessarily want to recognize what led to their break in the first place. They were eager to come back.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of it is just points to our heart. And so when it doesn't work, our hearts do get broken.
Yeah,
and it's rough. Really hard, and people really want to repair. And we are really focused on restorative justice, where we just try and figure out ways to hear both sides and find a way forward and practice, go, let's just try this for a month and see how this feels. And so I would say we'll go to the ends of the earth as far as we can go to keep whoever needs to be here safely.
And often that includes moderating two persons who have a definite collision of character and or opinion.
That's a good line. Collision of character or opinion.
Steve, let's talk a little bit about the practices that sustain welcome. Greeting, listening, presence.
Those are definitely important, and they don't always come naturally every minute of every day. We all wake up feeling a bit less welcoming sometimes or a bit less patient sometimes. And so while posturing is not necessarily the right word, sometimes you have to paint on a smile and remember how to welcome people even when you don't feel very welcoming personally. And that can happen to anyone. I wake up on the wrong side of the bed just as often as anyone does. But once I get here, the spirit of where I am sort of takes over and is a bit of a painkiller as to whatever other grievances I may have.
Let's be honest. Sometimes this is a community that can try your patience.
Oh, it's challenging sometimes.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And this is true. I mean, we talk about the cafe a lot, but in all the refuge gatherings, so this is for 20 years we've had this, it's just a lot of diversity. And so homogenous groups are just easier. Right. Homogenous groups are easier because who's there and you're kind of all on the same page. We always have had everyone mixed together. And so it is like a lot of diversity rubbing against each other in good ways, in my opinion. But it's not like everything's not smooth sailing. There's a lot of awkwardness. The refuge is like super good at awkward conversations, people that are really more introverted next to an extrovert, a lot of movement and conversation with people that maybe don't want to do that. There's always freedom. I think that's a practice in welcome is you can come and you don't have to fully participate like everybody else. You can really take care of yourself. And so we sometimes have people to stand in the back or go, I pass. I don't want to be part, but I want to be here. And I think those things are not normal in most groups that have norms, where the norm is you kind of like got to come and fully participate. And here I think that more authentic. It's more authentic. Because people decide how they want to be, or they're just showing up more authentically, and other people are trying to do the same thing. And it just doesn't look clean, but it's really inclusive because then everyone really can be who they are. No one's trying to make somebody who doesn't want to share.
Which is evidentiary that we are definitely not a cult.
We always have to say that.
Otherwise, we'd be extremely homogenous.
So welcome has evolved here as a core value over really 20 years and has been defined for the last 10. but it's never ending. What is it you're still learning about welcome?
I think one of the things we're learning about welcome is that it's for everybody. So it doesn't matter about resourcing. And so I think sometimes people think, oh yeah, you're a welcoming community, so you welcome everybody who is under-resourced. Let's just say that. Financially or practically or whatever that is. Like welcome is for everybody. So we think about volunteers. Like our volunteer base, I mean, we always were volunteer run. You know, no one got paid to start the Refuge. None of us got paid. We all paid to do it. We paid for everything out of our own pocket to start. And then honestly, for a good chunk of years, no one got paid. Where we raised support here and there, but it was like a labor of love. So it was built on volunteers. But then there was like a core. Now our needs have really expanded. So we have more volunteers than we've ever had. And I think that is like, we want a place of welcome is welcoming people's gifts. Like what people have to bring. And a lot of people have been in systems, organizations, churches where they weren't valued for their gifts. Like I know people that were like handing out programs was how they served in their church. And they're like super gifted. They're social workers or fundraisers or cook sous chefs or whatever. And they're like handing out programs because that's the way they contribute. And I think welcoming, going, oh my gosh, you have that gift to bring it here. Because this is a place that will really value that part of you if you want to. And I think that's a piece is like extending our welcome across everybody and everything. And then I think one probably significant way we've really grown, and Steve's been a big part of this because Steve is a peer advocate. And so Steve started, he came in his car, unhoused, ended up staying, sweeping, came every day, did the next step. It's an amazing story. And then got housed and then went to peer training in this last year. He was already a peer because he knows what it feels like. And he brings this presence and welcome in ways that other people can't because it's uniquely you. And so to watch like the development of like growing into who you always were. This isn't new. It was just buried in there. It was. And so now it's like come out and now Steve is peer. And I think that seeing what's happened with our community partners, so it's also welcome to wider partners. I think we didn't have that mindset as much as we have in the last couple of years because now we went from in 2025, we had 53, either 53 or 57. I don't have the number right now. I'm getting them mixed up. But in the 50s, community partners who helped us do something and were part of here. They brought us something. They were on site and brought their gifts. They volunteered, but it was like a group or an organization. It wasn't an individual. And that is at 92, I think, at the end of 2025. So from 2024 to 2025, we grew that by 60-something%. And I think that's a spirit of welcome.
I agree.
Because what it was is like, hey, we need you. And we have a place for you to bring your organizations or communities gifts. And I would say that's a big shift for us. It really changed and it kind of like turned outward. And then since Steve's been here, like look at how much has changed in partnerships in a limited time.
Quite striking.
Yeah. And that those folks feel like it's home. And we had such a sweet story that just happened last week because one of our friends died on January 1st. And William, was a big part of the community for many years. And the cafe community was unhoused, got housed, died of health issues related to all kinds of things of chronic homelessness and hard stuff. And we had a beautiful, simple, total Refuge style memorial service here last week. And we had, I think, 5 or 6 organizations represented who came to support William and the Refuge and celebrating his life. And one of them was somebody who used to be a community partner and switched agencies, but cared and came. And when she came in, I was like, welcome home. Welcome home. And she's like, it does feel like I'm coming home. And I can say that that's what's evolved in the last handful of years that we didn't have. And that it feels like it's kind of exploded our welcome in a new way that makes me really excited for the future, because people need it no matter what your socioeconomic issue is.
I think Kathy touched on some very good points there, that welcome is not defined by anyone exactly the same as it is by anyone else. We have people that come in the door and they just want to quietly walk in, sit down, be left alone, and have something to drink while they get their bearings. And then we have others who want to run right over to the table and introduce themselves and start asking for a list of what's available. So we kind of try to, as we see someone come in looking around, maybe looking lost, whether it be someone who's a possible volunteer, or whether it be someone who's in need of help or services, or even someone who just is curious enough to walk through the door, we seem to have a talent here for finding out what a person needs rather quickly as far as how they want to be related to. And that could be because we're constantly all in flux and all in motion, and we're just trying to feel out what's comfortable for this new person that we're greeting. And I've seen people sit here for 6 hours before they ever even really spoke much other than having our essentials related to them and filling out a small questionnaire that kind of is an introductory tool for us to understand what their need is. And the same works with when we're out in the community doing outreach. That is a form of welcoming people as well, because we're out inviting people to come here. We're out inviting oftentimes partners to come who may not have previously been a partner. We're inviting persons who are unhoused that we find in the community amongst the streets. And sometimes people just walk up and say, what are you guys all about? What are you doing here? And we tell them, and then they get curious enough to show up later. Just not very long ago on Monday, I was here just helping with some outreach stuff. And the leasing agent from my apartments showed up to post a notice. I welcomed her in, showed her the place. We had a long discussion about what she called tax credit properties and how those could be useful. And she may well come back and try to give us a bit of schooling as to how we might look for those for our friends who need housing.
As we wrap this up, I'd like to turn the conversation a little bit outward. I have a question for both of you. I'd like you to each answer it. Let's start with Steve. How would you encourage anyone listening to this podcast to practice welcome where they are right now?
That's a big question. I think that just keeping a mind that is open to difference and an eagerness to relate to others is the basis of how people can welcome one another.
Yeah, I would just springboard off that, honestly, and just look people in the eye, say hello, get off our phone.
I was about to say,
yes,
phone is such a huge distraction, and for something that was supposed to bring us all so much closer together.
Yes.
I really don't feel like I know anybody around me anymore.
It's different. You walk into a room and everyone's like, their heads are down on their phone. So like phone down, head up, just simple questions, like basic humanity and connection, just recognizing that so many of us aren't connected. And so any kind of simple connection, it really extends welcome. And it makes me think of something, this is from so long ago, I'll have to look, but it was a post I wrote when I was blogging a long time ago, and it was called Mobile Homes. And it was about how we could bring a sense of home out. It wasn't about mobile home parks. It was about we could embody, like, I want to be a refuge as a person. So when I'm out, I can be a mobile home somewhere and just like really be a sense of like providing a sense of home. And home, a lot of people don't have that. We had terrible homes. We had unstable homes. We had dysfunctional homes. We had insecure homes. We had violent homes. We had so many things. And so if we could like take out and embody that in our interactions, we could help heal some of that wound. And so I think that that's a piece of welcome. If we can bring refuge out by just being connected and knowing people's names and saying hi and doing things that we do all the time here, but just more naturally out there. It's not to have them come to the refuge. The refuge name doesn't have to be said. It has nothing to do with actually the refuge. It just has to be with being a place that embodies the refuge. That is far more important to me than people knowing about the refuge.
Listening to Kathy and Steve, it becomes clear that the refuge isn't about being agreeable or comfortable. It's about making room. It's about staying present when things are messy, unfamiliar, or costly. And it's about choosing relationship again and again. When people are welcomed, truly welcomed, something changes. Shame loosens its grip. Isolation softens, and community becomes something you can feel, not just talk about. At the refuge, welcome isn't a doorway you pass through once. It's a table you keep returning to. Thank you for joining us for episode 2 of This is the Refuge. And thank you to Kathy Escobar and Steve Palmer for helping us tell the story of what welcome really looks like. For more about the refuge and upcoming community gatherings, visit therefugeonline.org. I'm Dr. Decibel, and this is The Refuge, a community shaped by presence, courage, creativity, and hope. Show up where you are. We'll meet you here next time.